As the walls between our political discourse and our private lives thin and fall away, emotions get snared in the endless bureaucracy of it all. We have familial disagreements over elected officials, laws regulating our bodies are approved or abolished by abstract democratic systems, and social media breeds political skullduggery as much as it gives us weird cats on demand. The slogan "the personal is political" may have been born of the second wave of feminism, but has grown to become all-encompassing. While the debate rages over political agendas in entertainment, it's been front and centre at the movies long before Mr. Smith went to Washington 80 years ago. But what does this have to do with a little brown bear in a little blue coat? For such an unassuming, adorable fellow best known for Mischief and Marmalade, the recent theatrical adaptation of Paddington and its equally excellent sequel are empathetically and unavoidably political. I don't mean to lump these in with the dry electioneering punditry of the evening news. There's no preaching, no judgmental swipes at either side of the aisle, and nothing in the way of party affiliation. This precocious scamp is here to celebrate community, inclusivity, and individuality, offering a fuzzy paw to anyone willing to take it. Paddington sees our shaggy companion travel from darkest Peru, which is actually rather lovely, all the way to Britain, clumsily bumbling his way into the hearts of the Brown family. In the sequel, now acclimatised to British life, he gets to work saving enough pennies to afford a special birthday present for his Aunt Lucy. On their adventures, Paddington and the Browns face off against poachers, prying neighbours, and cat-burgling thespians. Conventional? Well, kind of, but that's in no way to their detriment. The formula of family fun is a vessel by which to communicate with both children and adults in tandem, without condescending the kids or lecturing the parents. In every iteration of this story, from the books to the children's television series to these big screen heartwarmers, this dapper little man is a beautiful immigrant. Not the kind coming to take your job, your cultural purity, or your hard-spent taxes. You see, Paddington is an actual immigrant, not a distracting scare tactic or whipping boy for xenophobic nationalists. By land and by sea, he makes these perilous, uncertain journeys because he's vying for what most of us take for granted: safety and security in an accepting country. Upon his arrival in the UK, as he stands at the train station seeking refuge, it's hard to avoid thoughts of one of the darkest times in British history: the Blitz. During World War II, countless children were hurried away from the uncertain streets of a London under aerial bombardment and off to the comparative safety of countryside seclusion. The eccentric shopkeeper here is Mr. Gruber, a childhood wartime evacuee, and a man whose job is the preservation and celebration of his adopted home's antiquities. Paddington's escape from the earthquake-stricken darkest Peru, on the other hand, is an inversion of this familiar wartime relocation, swapping lush forests for concrete jungles in pursuit of shelter. Enthralled by the bustling streets and enamoured by the British cultural cornerstones he's familiarised himself with from afar, he inquisitively drinks in everything he sees. With a few adjustments to the workings of indoor plumbing, and some inevitable misunderstandings, Paddington doesn't merely stumble into a belonging unity. He earns it with love, work, and pride. It's a direct challenge to the notion that welcoming a foreign influence will in some way dilute the patriotic tonic of our national spirit. Those who view the British Isles as a closed ecosystem unable to afford these small humanitarian gestures reveal themselves as ill-informed curmudgeons, which in turn places them on the outside of the very same community they claim to protect.
We don't want him here!
No, of course you don't. You never have. As soon as you set eyes on that bear, you made up your mind about him.
There are inescapable parallels between the pride once taken in Britain's efforts to shelter those in need and our current climate of skewed inflammatory rhetoric, where our collective fear of the other is projected as a means of division. This is especially hammered home in Paddington 2. Here, we're shown that by regressing to some idealised uniformity of homegrown, multi-generational Britishness without foreign influence and improvement, small losses would weigh heavy, cheapening and tearing away at our communal heart. As Mark Commode ever so eloquently puts it,
the story is, the little things that somebody does that are decent make the world a more decent place. And if you take one decent person out of an equation, what does it leave behind?
We're being shown immigrants and refugees not as threatening unknowns, but as potentially welcome additions to a rich tapestry of experiences and emotional intelligence. An open celebration of diversity in all its shapes, shades, and sizes, the music isn't bound to a sterile stereo. It leaps from the streets in a rainbow of rhythmic, ramshackle joy. All these additions, characters, and creative charms aren't a burden. They're a gift of nourishing ideas and eclecticism. Paddington 2 goes even further in its evaluation of the societally shunned when it looks at the prisoners of Britain. Nobody in their right mind would expect gritty social realism or kitchen sink brutality behind these bars. This is not a prophet with an adorable hat. Paddington 2 certainly puts a colourful spin on bleak confinement, but in doing so, it examines the incarcerated with conscientious, considerate eyes.
This is my friend, Knuckles.
Oh, yeah.
And this is Fibs.
G'day.
Spoon.
Hello.
Jimmy the Snitch.
All right.
T-Bone.
Watch out.
The Professor.
Hey.
Squeaky Pete.
Ow.
Double Bass Bob.
Hello.
Farmer Jack.
Okay.
Mad Dog. Johnny Cashpoint.
Ka-ching.
Sir Geoffrey Wilcott.
I hope I can rely on your vote.
And Charlie Rumble.
Assumptions are established, then comedically set straight, towering brutes hide sensitive dispositions, and all are treated with the respect of men paying penance for whatever their crimes may be. Paddington doesn't see striped outfits and ominous tattoos, nor does he make rash judgments based on these signifiers. He sees humans, flawed, failed, and fractured in many ways, but humans all the same. There's no questioning the nature or severity of their deeds or whether or not they're innocent or guilty. It's about treating with compassion those who may be deemed unworthy of it. Through positive interactions, extracurricular and educational programs, and giving back to a society from which they've taken, we too begin to define these characters as individuals, capable of heart, intelligence, and emotional complexity, as well as all the menace of their criminal convictions. Rather than focusing on recidivism rates once they're beyond the bolted doors, it takes the hopeful view that rehabilitation, re-education, and treatment are as, if not more important than retribution. While this all seems very liberal and progressive, because in many ways it is, Paddington paints things with a more politically humanist brush. This is about content of character, not initial appearances. Mr. Brown, the stern father of Paddington's adoptive family, could quite easily be written off as stubborn, set in his ways and conservative. His thoughts on the matters I've focused on up to this point lean towards cautious and borderline alarmist.
Stranger danger.
What?
Keep your eyes down, there's some sort of bear over there, probably selling something.
But he's never made out to be a bad person. Sociopolitically, he's a product of his environment, untrusting of those emanating from out with a very specific comfort zone, quick to defend, and slow to trust. He's also a dedicated father, hardworking and loving husband, and most importantly, he can learn from experiences rather than rigidly remaining set in beliefs that no longer match what he knows beyond his bubble.
It doesn't matter that he comes from the other side of the world, or that he's a different species, or that he has a worrying marmalade habit.
The entire Brown family is a microcosm of British middle-class life. Well, beyond the fact that there is no way in hell they could actually afford a house like that in London. They're at odds with one another over any number of issues, outlooks and means of expression, but resolute in their belief that they want what's best for those around them. Even their sneering neighbour, who so often sets out to rid the street of Paddington's whimsical ways, is doing so out of a misguided obligation to keep himself and his homestead safe from unknown disruptive forces.
I've raised the neighbourhood panic level to wild hysteria.
Rather than beating us with the book of liberal progressiveness, we're simply being given an alternative to fear. It's political optimism, and that's something that rarely exists either on screen or in the real world. Paddington and Paddington 2 are first and foremost joyous, jubilant entertainment. When describing something as fun for the whole family, it can lead to the belief that it's in some way watered down. That is in no way the case here. These films are acutely aware that modern families, much like the contemporary world in which we live, are full of contrasts, corners, and conflicting ideals. Yet for all our division, we so often come together in extraordinary acts of kinship. These are two beautiful odes to humanitarianism, cultural diversity, self-betterment as a communal activity, and a wide spectrum of acceptance. Judgment so often begets isolation, division, and discord without anything to show for it. I'd rather do things the Paddington way, sharing sandwiches, consideration, and small gestures of kindness. Special shout out to our Patreon producers Jennifer C. and Paul of the Polls, and hot damn, let's just take a minute and pour one out for these outstanding human beings who support the channel over on Patreon. What films give you hope in humanity as the world is slowly but surely sucked into a vortex of abject terror? Hit us up in the comments where we can also just talk about how cute Paddington is. If you want to help us out, like, share, comment and subscribe, or if you'd like more reviews, film clubs and extras, check out our Patreon at the link below. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.